Hello and welcome to 2000.
You can't say that. That's Jason Fenske's. Hello and welcome is Jason.
We're glad you're with us.
Oh, that's Motor Week. That's out.
Yes. Okay.
No.
No,
Doug.
You've done it.
What of the in case you're new to Throttle House, shit, that was no. And I'm James. Anyway, we have books.
And now for the news.
That's somebody did that.
The Top Gear
Tonight. Oh, Jake made us a fabulous
new
background.
decor.
Yeah, this was funny. Actually,
Everyone will surely know what that is.
That is a VR6 head gasket.
Yes.
Do you know which VR6 that is?
No.
It's 2.8 liter. I bought
Did
that
they
as a
come
prop.
in other displacements?
Yes.
Oh, 3.2
and 3.6.
later, yeah.
But that is the original 10.2 liter, 10.2 degree, whatever. Jake, we were talking with Jake over the break, and we're like, hey, we need to do something to zhuzh up this thing. We're like, maybe we'll paint the wall or do something. And he and his wife had AI make. It was your wife, right? Yeah, had AI make a bunch of suggestions of what the background could look like, and it's fucking epic.
I mean, it's not a lot of. There's a lot of room for improvement. That's not our strength here. It's hopefully the quality of content that we deliver.
More importantly, this is just consider this as step one in the direction of the new and improved, much prettier Carmudgeon show, part of the Haggerty podcast network.
Brought to you by your hosts Jason Cammisa and Derek Tam-Scott.
And by the Helena Rubinstein Foundation.
The Helena Rubinstein Foundation.
The one thing I hear from you over the break is not like, hey, hope you're feeling better. If you need anything, let me know.
I said exactly, literally that.
Before you said that, however, you're like, hey, check out this link for the Wikipedia page for Helena Rubinstein. And I'm sitting there in my fever going, oh, this is a name that I've heard my whole life, and I know nothing about Hella. She was a badass.
Right? That's why I sent it to you.
And it's how sad is it this woman donated probably hundreds of millions of dollars to the creation of all this PBS content, and we just fucking dismissed her. And 40-something years later, here I am going, oh, bitch was fucking cool.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Better late than never. Anyway, this episode is not about Helena Rubinstein. It's not about PBS. It is about... It is a heated, no, it is not heated. It is a frank exchange of ideas on the topic of, I don't know, affordability and whether it's a good time to be a young car enthusiast first entering the market as a buyer of a first discretionary money type of enthusiast car.
And you'll be very surprised to hear that the old man in the room, i.e. that one, is like, things suck and kids have it hard and it's shitty and whatever. And they fucking...
At least it's sympathetic instead of like, just...
suck it up.
Make more money and buy a car.
I didn't say that. I'm saying, we basically...
I didn't say you said it. I was just saying that I was having a perspective
that's fair enough. But my thing is, it ain't that fucking bad. You just don't like the things that the kids like because you're too fucking old. And on that bombshell, to use another thing, please consider joining the Haggerty. There's a noise outside. You probably can't hear it, so they all think I'm crazy now. I hear buzzing. Is there buzzing? Please consider joining the Haggerty Drivers Club, which is responsible for this. God, it's been a year since I've done this. The last time I said this was 2023. I have
Haggerty Drivers Club. You can support us by joining it, and it offers free roadside towing for your classic cars. Roadside assistance generally, access to the valuation tool, the subscription to the award-winning magazine, and one other thing that Jason...
Access to VIP events and discounts on all your favorite stuff and whatever. Great. There's a whole bunch of stuff. Link is below. And
ready, set, go. Jingle. Carmudgeon jingle.
Oh, I have to pee. So they were like, jiggle? What? No, not yet. God, how long was that? Holy shit. Oh, hold on. This episode of The Carmudgeon Show is brought to you by the Valentine 1 Radar Locator. Find radar before it finds you. Get more information at bit.ly/Valentine1_Haggerty. That's https://bit.ly/VALENTINU1_H Are we actually recording already?
Yes, all of that was recorded.
Oh, shit.
Good thing we didn't use any names.
Yeah. Hi.
Hello.
It's 2024.
Both in the time of recording and the time of consumption of this episode.
Yeah. And you know what 2024 is the fourth time in a row of?
a leap year since I was born. I don't know.
It is a leap year. It's
Yes.
also, I hope, the year that we can stop talking about fucking COVID. I genuinely thought this was done. Like, I just thought nothing of it. And then I got sick, of course, between Christmas and New Year's, the only week I had off the entire year. And yeah. And then one of my friends is like, did you test? And I'm like, no, why the fuck would I test? Like, it's a cold. It's fine. But I had a fever and I'm like, I'm late getting the booster, so I'll go get checked out. And yeah, the fucking thing, like, just alarm bells went off. Apparently, I very much have COVID. So I hope
my turn, I guess.
Yeah, but like, seriously, what year? This is 2020 part 4.
Yeah,
Like, enough
Good
of
times.
this shit.
At least it's not like lethal for most people anymore.
Yeah,
if you're vaccinated.
yeah. If you're vaccinated and have been exposed 200 fucking thousand times, like I have, apparently, it turns into a nasty cold. And I'm.
Oops.
Did you shit yourself again?
Yes.
This is the second episode in a row where something has plopped out of you at the ground.
Oopsies.
What did you eat?
An
An Apple Store, apparently.
Apple Store. Yes.
So anyway, so that was my New Year's, was sitting by myself watching Drive to Survive on Netflix.
Oh, you're getting caught up.
Well, I'm caught up with that, and so then I switched to the Great British Bake Off.
Natural pairing of TV.
Yeah, well, the problem was I was sitting there. So when you have a fever, your heart rate goes up. And so my Apple Watch kept yelling at me that my heart rate was high.
Because you were excited about motorsport.
Well, I also had a fever. So it was over 100. But every 10 minutes, it's like, "Da-da-da, you haven't moved and your heart rate's over 100. What's wrong with you?" And I'm like, "Ugh, fucking." So I finally just couldn't keep watching Drive to Survive because I was too like excited about it. And then I switched to the Great British Bake Off. And
Which
then
was less exciting.
And I still kept getting them. So then I took my temperature. I'm like, oh, okay.
You were just excited about baking.
That show is so good.
Drive to Survive or the Great British Bake Off?
Yes.
I
both
haven't
of them.
seen Great British Bake Off.
It's just good, old-fashioned, wholesome television with a lot of British innuendo. I mean, one of the contestants this year, they had to make everyone made cakes out of, I hope the audience isn't like turning out, but so I'll make it quick because it's really funny. Poor Jake is like, yes, they all just turned off and he just left.
Now, eventually, you do plan to have cars on your car podcast.
No, they had to make animals, and the one contestant decides to make a beaver, and of course Prue, the grand old dame, is like, "So let's talk about your beaver," and everyone loses it, and then she's like, "All of you, stop it! Like, just stop it right now! You're being childish. Let me see your beaver," and then she loses it, and it's just so fucking stupid.
Quite often I need 2 holes so that I can squirt.
I don't care really about baking, but I love people. I love watching people who are incredibly talented at something I'm not.
Yes.
And you watch these people who are just not pro anything. They're just normal people. And they're amazing at the things they can do. It's the same phenomenon to watch like Idol back in the day, because you're just,
or the Olympics.
no, well, those are people who are trained, really, really trained. But like Idol,
Are you talking about people walking in off the street?
people just kind of walking off the street, like, you had Jennifer, what's her name? Jennifer Hudson. I still have COVID brain. Who was just like, they're like, "Do you have any formal training?" And she's like, "Nah, I kind of sang in the shower." And, and then she opens her mouth and you're like, you're the voice of an entire generation. Like, how did you not know that you sounded like that? And it's the same thing with the bakers, and the same thing with even, was that fucking terrible show, Project Runway. I watched a season of years ago, and I clearly know and care nothing about fashion. But you're watching these people, and Tim Gunn's like, models, designers have a hefty cinch sack, and they make these pieces of art out of it, and you're like, what? Where did you come from, and how the hell did you do that? And I'm amazed by watching people who are great at their craft. Same reason I watch M539. Straighten. I just watched his 1.5 hour long video of assembling an S65 V8. And he is not trained as a mechanic, which is scarcely believable when you watch him work, because he's so meticulous about everything he does, and his technique on working on anything, including an engine, which is his first time he built anything, it's like watching an artist. So yes, I highly recommend watching anything where someone is
good at something.
What did you do for New Year's?
I don't remember.
That much drinking? That's not like you.
No. I had like 2 drinks, maybe.
It's a lot for you.
I know.
Did you buy another another car drunk?
No, I didn't buy any more cars. No more drunk car buying. Okay. I am trying to swear off of that unless it's for business reasons, because then it could potentially be financially favorable instead of unfavorable, which is usually what happens when I buy shit boxes.
Yeah. Hold on. Didn't we just do an episode about cars that shouldn't cost you all that much money? The bull market episode.
Oh, to own.
Yeah.
Well, yes, I'm not buying any of those cars that are advisable. I'm buying inadvisable cars like Citroens.
And 202 Mercedes that you take rallying.
Yes. Yeah, but that's like a fully, like, I'm okay with writing off $400, Actually, I think we're in the car $2,500 now.
Wow.
Yes.
That's total, not per person, right?
Correct. Okay. Yes, $2,500 total investment in the rally clock.
So you did no classic car rally on the first?
No. I've been busy working. We're trying to get this business launched.
But who's buying cars on January 1st?
Well, there's all this like background stuff that you have to do in order to get the business launched, like make a website and put copy on it and have bios and get the cars listed and capture assets of all of them and all that stuff, which we were doing.
On January 1st?
I mean, whenever it's convenient and everyone's available, it doesn't matter. That's the nice thing about working for yourself.
You are a startup.
Yes, but also that means that like on random Tuesdays, I'm going to the beach. And
you did that anyway.
Yeah.
Every single time I've called you in the last 2 years during the business day, you were in a gym.
That's not true.
Maybe 96%.
I like to go when it's not crowded. And if I'm writing a script, then I can do that at any old time. You do that too. You write at all hours of the day and night.
Yeah, but I don't go to the gym 6 times a day, clearly. No, what I did do is a garage refurbishment.
Oh,
I did a facelift on my home garage, and
life cycle impulse.
A life cycle and LCI, to use BMW's terms. I had enough with so for those who are not intimately familiar with my garage, I did this 12 years ago or something. I took this shitty garage that had no drywall and whatever else, and I drywalled it, and then I do everything kind of on the cheap. So I did Home Depot $9.66 4-foot fluorescents, and I did 12 of them. So it was 12 4-foot 2 light fixtures on the ceiling. It was like 45,000 lumen, and it was like working in an operating room. And then I gradually over the years kind of painted a couple of walls gray, and then I epoxied the floor. I did that actually first, which was super easy. And then Home Depot had a 50% off sale on their like shitty kitchen cabinets. So I did kitchen cabinets and a kitchen countertop. And overall, I think the garage looked pretty good. I had a little disco ball and a Studio 54 sign in there that I had found at a place that would just recycled old junk. And so it just had a theme, and it was kind of fun, and it made me smile when I drove in. And I decided that like my warehouse has a 4-foot in diameter disco ball in it. It's also painted like dark black. Like I need to have one disco looking space and just do a different theme for my home garage. And the fluorescents were becoming a nightmare. They were like at any given time, 20 or 30% of them were out. And I was constantly now replacing ballasts, and like they're just getting impossible to get. And so fuck that. I ripped them all out. And as it turns out, there are a bunch of gentlemen who are across this very parking lot who own a lighting company. And I had talked to them a year ago about getting LEDs. And so they do extruded lengths of C-channel LED fixtures that go inside. They're 5/8 inch deep. So they go inside up against the framing, and you butt drywall right up against them and mud up to them. So they're just basically flush mounted LEDs. And I'm like, you know what? I can just screw these right onto my existing ceiling. And so I did. And so I did 96.
So they are not flush.
They are not flush. So I painted the ceiling black, flat black, almost black. It's like a charcoal. And then did 96 linear feet. So 16 feet times 6 fixtures in a row, and put dim to warm color changing LEDs in there. So that the dimmer they go, the more like candlelight they get. So they're 1800 Kelvin to 2700. And then I have a hole in the middle of the ceiling where the old garage door opener was. Oh, I put a new garage door in. I finally got rid of the like 40-year-old broken one that I had. And I went with a glass one to let light in because I take a lot of pictures in that garage, and it's effectively doubles as a photo studio. And so I got rid of the garage door and the center mounted garage door opener
Motor unit.
and went to the motor unit mounted on the side.
Yes.
And we moved the tracks up by like a foot. And so it totally opened the ceiling. And I'm like, I don't want to patch that hole because I hate doing drywall work. So I wired up and installed an outrageously ornate, ridiculously trashy crystal chandelier with a 21-inch white medallion in the middle of it. And put dim to warm bulbs in there. So I am now going to show you, and we're going to get your reaction to my now even more ridiculous Garage Mahal. So there's a bunch of, just keep swiping through there.
It's fabulous. It's just,
it's
immensely.
It's ridiculous. Cute. And I thought, like, if this is my entrance to the house, this is how I come in and out. And, like when the garage door opens, I want to laugh. Like, that's the thing, is it should be silly. And since I have the warehouse and I'm no longer really working on cars so much in the space, I don't need it to be an operating room. And so, yeah, it's so stupid. But then I decided to get rid of the Studio 54 sign, and I have the Alpine stereo there. Mm-hmm. And so now it's this beautifully lit, ridiculous, cheap, because I'm cheap. That chandelier looks like it cost somebody with very bad taste thousands of dollars. It's plastic. It's from Home Depot, and it was $129. So
perfect.
Yeah. We did one episode on Garage Mahals already, so we'll leave it at that. But I think everyone should go out. Like, I feel like HGTV should be sponsoring this. Everyone should go out and just do something fun in your garage. Like, I want the neighbors, none of them have seen it yet, but like, I want the whole neighborhood to burst into laughter every time the garage door opens. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Well, some like bougie people put like a chandelier and a seating area in their fucking closet. I spend a lot of time in this room, and it's my greeting when I walk in the door. The door should go up and the chandelier should go on, and it should automatically probably be playing like some Saint-Tropez, chill out music. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Sounds like you spent the time on something more productive than I did.
This is what happens when you have a fever.
You have fever dreams.
Sitting on the couch and you're like, I can order that chandelier for $129 and go have curbside delivery at Home Depot. Anyway, your garage is next. You're going to have to zhuzh that up.
I think I have to focus on my business.
Okay. Back to the business. What are you doing? Tell everyone.
Now it is publicly launched, so I promised that I would provide an update. It's we're a used car dealer. That's my dream.
Daihatsu. What did you do last time, Jake?
Daewoo and Daihatsu. Yes.
Nobody's D is bigger. What the fuck did you? Jake came up. You're gonna have to dig that back up. Came up with a logo that, of course, made us the biggest D in town.
Yes.
Yeah. DTS's DD dealership, the biggest D in the town.
So, we're not selling. We have not yet sold, unfortunately, any Daihatsus or Daewoos.
So when you say your used car dealership, you're talking about cars.
Yeah, whatever. Yes, our clients have that might be of interest. So, yes.
Honda Civics.
Yes, Honda Civics.
Ferrari F40s.
If available, yeah.
Okay.
We have some Porsche RSs and stuff like that.
What is this business called?
It's called OTS, which is the last initials of the founder. So the co-founders we are three, and one of them, his father has probably what is one of the best Ferrari restoration shops in the United States. I mean, he's a Pebble Beach judge, and he's grown up in that environment and is also a racing driver. And so his name is Tazio Otis.
Tazio, of course, named after
Nuvolari. Tazio Nuvolari. That's actually his middle name. I can't Tazio. I can't disclose his first name.
I met Tazio, as I decided to call him.
Tots. Tater Tots.
Tater Tots. I met him. I've only met him twice in my life, but the first time we encountered each other was on a New Year's. It's probably like 6 years ago this week. Mm-hmm. I was on my way to a New Year's rally and I stopped to get gas, and I will have a photo of this because I took a picture of a red Chevy Sprint Turbo getting gas. And I'm like, what numbnuts is out at 6 o'clock in the morning on New Year's Eve in this car? And he was like, I'm on the way to the rally. And so, yeah.
He still has that.
Okay.
And one of our other founders has a white Chevy Sprint
Turbo.
Is unbelievable. So 2/3, I guess that means I'm next.
Well, and the other weird thing is your other founder interviewed to be Paolo before Paolo was Paolo.
Yes.
So
he's founded Vault, the car club in the Bay Area.
So yeah, it's very funny enough that
small universe,
small world. Okay, so it's the three of you. It's OTS with BTS and DTS.
Yeah, I mean, if so, people, of course, now that I've announced that I'm leaving ECME, are like, what's going to happen with BTS? You know, people are concerned about that. We'll try and keep it alive. We'll try and find a way to keep it alive.
I have already mentioned to the Haggerty people that you should join us on the Haggerty channel.
Well,
look, you got to pay the bills.
Yes,
I'm just trying to help you.
Yep.
You know, you can insert in every episode. Hello, this episode is brought to you by OTS because none of you have any money and we have all of it.
Well, no, we have the cars. Right?
Okay.
I think it's car rich, cash poor. That's kind of the theme.
Is that
that's our
Here we go.
tagline.
You just gave Jake another Photoshop. OTS, car rich, cash poor.
Oh yeah!
I actually ripped that off of a guy who owns a Miura. Not me.
Of course he's cash poor. He's got to fucking keep the Miura running.
He had two for a while.
Oh God.
But anyway, so yeah, we're all relatively young in this business, and we have experience in the old timey cars because we both spent a lot of time around vintage Ferraris.
Would you call yourself young in this business?
I think so. I mean, it's dominated by, if you go to annually, Haggerty has this thing where all of the industry people get together, and I would say that yes, in that space.
Okay,
we're young. There's a lot of people who have dealers who are old timers who've been around since the dawn of time. I mean, there's this legacy group of dealers that, have existed for a long time.
But I think you're selling yourself short to say you're new in this business. You've been selling, you've been actively part of this business.
Yes, young
for
by age.
20?
Yeah, 2003.
Okay, it's 21 years.
Yeah.
So it's a long time.
Yes, but I mean, and in that course of doing that, I saw the way things were 20 years ago, and that's actually the topic of this episode that we're working our way to gradually, which is the way that I think things have changed a lot in the last 20 years.
Welcome to the In My Day.
Yes, I know.
We did slide rules. Oh, God.
Back in my day, you could buy a Gullwing for 76 cents.
Well, that was a lot of money in that day.
I know, it was. That was like a week's pay in the Depression.
You'll have to tell me all about that one day. Tell me about your Depression experience.
Right. So anyway, we both have been doing this quite literally since we were children. And so we have a lot of experience in the old way of doing things, but also, are young enough to have experienced the way things have changed and seen the landscape change and the emergence of this whole new era of collectible cars in much the same way the same thing was happening 20 years ago. 20 years ago, the cars that were like emerging were things from the 70s where you're like, could a car from the 70s ever be collectible? You're like, look at the terrible colors. This one's lime green and this one's orange. It's terrible. It's shag carpeting. What a terrible era. There can't be any collectible cars from that period. And that was the narrative, 20 years ago. And
I bet 20 years before that, it was, there's no way cars from the
post-war
40s,
era.
Right, exactly. I mean, yeah. So I think you mentioned when we got here that you had a discussion with somebody that started a topic and you wanted the topic of the day to be how things have changed and young people can't afford collector cars because everything has changed so much. And my immediate reaction is, I'm not sure I agree with that. I think we've talked about this before where there's a traveling window of what is collectible. And I think the things right now that are collectible to maybe more my age group than yours, so 40s instead of 90s, have gotten expensive. But I think the stuff that's newer than that hasn't yet. And so, to a kid today, growing, somebody who's 25 years old, I don't think they're all that interested in the 70s, 80s, and 90s stuff that we are.
I think the Radwood has made that stuff relevant and accessible and interesting to people. And when I talk to, it's interesting because I have a friend he's only 7 years younger than me. And he is, of the mind that he calls them Bush era cars, which is early 2000s cars. And there's been an emergence of collectible cars of that genre already. 996 GT3s used to be $55,000 and now they're like $100,000. Or like 996s, used to be 15 grand and now the equivalent car is 16 grand. No, they're like $20,000. Those are still, I think, really good value, or 996s. And part of the reason for that is that, but 997s are more expensive. They never depreciated as much because it's the same car, but better in a bunch of meaningful ways that have made them not depreciate as much, you know? So then you look at 997, GT3s used to be $70,000 and now they're $120,000. And just all of this stuff that was sort of in the realm of like, okay, if I'm a good get a good professional job and save up, then I can buy a sort of $60,000-$70,000 Porsche GT3 and be driving around in a car with hydraulic steering that's naturally aspirated and feels special and aggressive and sporty. And, you know, the actual avenue that for me started this sort of thought was the air-cooled Porsche. When I first bought one, you could buy, if you were careful, you could buy a 911 SC for $11,000 or $12,000.
This was when?
This is like 2007, 2008, 2000 up to 2012 or beyond.
Okay, so 15 years ago plus.
Yeah, 15 years ago, you know, if you had no money and you wanted an enthusiast car and you're like, I want something that's a driver's car and I want it to be rear-wheel drive and a manual transmission and naturally aspirated, you buy an E30 for, you know, $3,500 bucks. Mm-hmm. You buy a Miata for, you know, also $3,500 bucks. Mm-hmm. If you had a little more money, you could buy an E30 M3 for 13 grand or an E36 M3 for kind of similar money. And then you're like, or instead you could buy a 911. You could buy an air-cooled 911 for the same money instead of buying an E30 M3. You know, those cars have both done about the same thing. They're now both worth $70,000 or whatever. And so I liked the idea that basically, like fresh out of school, you're like, okay, I got a bonus. I got some kind of corporate job. They gave me 10 grand. I'm going to sell the shitbox that I had before and take the 10 grand that they gave me. And I'm going to buy an air-cooled 911 and get which is an iconic and timeless and like very visceral experience of steering feedback and like old carness, but usable every day, and plenty of parts exist and ready to maintain like with relative ease as long as nothing big needs work, i.e. the engine and transmission. Otherwise, they're very cheap to look after.
The Beatles.
And so the fact that it used to be possible, and this, you know, everybody wants a Porsche. We always complain about how everybody likes Porsches, but the fact of the matter is, like, it was a great entry level sports car to buy for $12,000 or $15,000 if you wanted a really nice one. And I think that's a shame because I talk to people who are, you know, 5 or 10 years younger than me, and like the idea that you would entry level a 911 that's air cooled is just completely foreign. Instead, that's like a $45,000 for like a rough, 40 if you're getting like a mid-year with a cooked 2.7 engine. And so to me, that's really tragic because that's like a really great way to have a usable sports car that's not too much pain. And, you know, and E30s are not $3,500 anymore. They're now $15,000 or $25,000 for a good 325 that has a red line that's not 6 RPM, like the NS. Or the M10.
Very rarely fully disagree with you, and I fully disagree with you.
Okay.
So you brought up a couple. I wish actually that we had, let's not admit this to the audience. So guys, tune out for a second. I wish that we had some time to really talk about this beforehand, because I would have charts and like, I would pull the legal brief that I did to poor Matt Farah in my discussion with him about the Cybertruck with illustrated diagrams. I'm sorry to say is in the fucking document, so I can show you guys there. But okay, you bring up a couple cars. First of all, 15 years ago, you're talking about Porsches that are $12,000, right? Mm-hmm. You know, the idea of having an air-cooled car. What is that $15,000 worth in today's money? That's my first question. So that $15,000 is probably 25. Right? 22, 25, somewhere in there, just based on inflation. So now let's also then take the car that's 15 years newer than that SE, right? Because everything is shifted forward 15 to 20 years. And so you can take a clapped out SC and 996, and that $12,000 SC becomes a $15,000 or $20,000 996. And actually the kids aren't any worse off than the younger people who are looking at, they're getting a job. You got old. So the cars that were of our interest to you, which are the air-cooled cars as an old person, and I'm joking around about calling you old, but I mean, those are the same cars that were out of touch for us when we were 20 something years old, because those were the 70s cars that were just way too expensive for us. And if you look now, an E30 M3 that was $12,000 15 years ago Well, 15 years post E30 M3 is 2006. That's an E46.
Yeah, and if you get the E46 that you want, it's like $60,000. You want a coupe with a competition package that's not clapped out, then it's $60,000.
At the time, you were talking about an Evo 2 M3, right? Those were $50,000-$60,000 or $40,000-$50,000 at the time. So what I'm talking about is you said 325i, right? What is a late LCI like 2005 330i ZHP, which would be the equivalent of a 325IS sedan?
15 or 20.
Right. Same as
But that's not $3,500. What is that $3,500 now? It's $7,500.
Yeah, but that $3,500 buys you a $6,000 really nice 325i or 330
yeah, but you used to be able to get a
non-ZHP.
325IS for that kind of money back then. The one you actually wanted.
Could you? A really nice one?
Well, it doesn't have to be really, really nice. You just said a not really, really nice one. You just said like a reasonable, usable one.
In all seriousnness, though, I bought my wagon in 2002, which was nice-ish, not great, 325i wagon for €1,500. Mm-hmm. And then I bought my first, when I moved to California, this is a perfect, moved to California was January of 2008, so whatever it was. I bought an 88 325i coupe for $3,300, and it was a 220,000 mile, no clear coat, cheap shitbox. I think you could go and replicate that right now, inflation adjusted, with an E46 325 or 330i with no paint, 200,000 miles on it, would be $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. I think actually the value proposition is still there. I just think that you're stuck, to use a term, and don't get mad at me, but you're still looking at the same cars when, to somebody who's 25 years old right now, an E46 is a fucking old car. E90s are old. F30s are old. I like all these 20-something-year-old people that I know are like, I just bought like an F30. And I'm like, why the fuck did you buy that pile of shit? But that's an old car to them. That's an E30
but it's
to
not
me.
Good. That's an objectively not a good car. And so let me finish, because the rest of this conversation was actually a discussion about what I concluded was that the new generation of enthusiasts is being fucked in 3 key ways.
Oh, God. This is going to be good.
I wish that I had thought about this more recently than like 2 weeks ago. But one of them is the cost of living and the amount of disposable income that they have when they graduate, right? The cost of education, the amount of student debt that you graduate with means that you don't have as much disposable income. So you have less disposable income. The cost of things going up means that, and then this is true of everybody. And so everybody has less disposable income, so there's less interest in buying enthusiast sort of frivolous cars. And this is an argument that you yourself made in that episode about the Z?
Do not use my quotes against my own argument.
But the point is that the menu of cars that you have to choose from that are interesting and enthusiastic is very different. The quantity and breadth and number of options at reasonable, accessible price points is a lot smaller now than it was
in the new car market. Absolutely.
In the new car market than it was in the 1990s, right? You had the whole sport compact thing. There were all kinds of different price points and different ways to spend sort of, I don't know what the number is, $20,000 on an interesting car. You know,
anything from 10 to 40 was,
you had a lot of options. You could do Corrado, or you could do MR2, or you could do all of the front wheel drive Civics,
all that stuff, Integras, and
exactly, and SERs and
Celicas. Blah, blah, blah. It was nonstop.
Yes.
Hyundai Tiburons, for fuck's sake. I mean,
so all of that is not all of it's gone, but most of it has gone, and so all of that stuff in the secondary market doesn't exist, and so there's fewer options that are good, that are just cheap, that you can pick up for no money to drive around and have a good time, because everybody has less disposable income, including the people who are, first entering the enthusiast car buying market in a secondary form. And so there's less stuff to buy because of the other, factors. And so I just feel like it's a worse time to be an enthusiast as a result.
Did you give all 3 ways that got fucked, or was that only 2?
No, I can't remember what the other one was, because I did this like 2 weeks ago and we did absolutely no preparation for this episode.
I'm trying to think of what other ways they could possibly be fucked.
Well, it's that other stuff has gotten more expensive, right? If you look at the outside, and I was like this too. And, I bought cars of this era that I'm describing, which is like the 80s and 90s, because that was what I could afford, not because it was what I wanted, because my spirit age was so old. I wanted those cars from the 60s. I do also remember a 3.8 liter E-Type coupe that ran, and it was a 2-seater, so not a 2+2, which is the one you don't want, for $17,500 when I started doing this. And I was like, man, that's a hell of a cool car for $17,500. It happened, but for the most part, the cars that I was lusting after, which were cars from the 60s and 70s, you pointed out the 70s 911s. During the same era when a 911 SC cost $12,000, a long hood 911S from the early 70s, a 72 911S was like $150,000 to $200,000.
Jesus Christ.
And you drive them back to back and you're like, the SC is kind of better. And I don't have that reaction when I drive a 996.
Okay. You're totally right there in that cars have not gotten better to drive, right? They've not gotten more interesting.
Yes.
And I think that is definitely one way where this generation's getting shafted.
Yes, when you bring up the F30 example, it's perfect for that because you're like, why did you buy that shitbox? Whereas if someone had driven an E30 and was like, oh, it's actually quite pleasant. The same thing with the E36.
Yeah, but what I have to do is what I do is a gut check. I always put myself in where was I or how old was this car when I was X age, right? And compared to a G30, the current 3 Series, which is the size of a tank and is basically a large luxury car, the F30 is light and quick and small and does all those things. And it's turbocharged so the kids can play with it and get more power out of it. And you want to go even older, E90, wow, that doesn't even have a CarPlay. Like that's a genuine, I think when I got my Scirocco, I was 21 years old and it was 10 years old. That was an ancient car. I was scared shitless of that car because it was so old, right? I bought it for $1,500. Technically, my dad bought it for $1,500 without his knowledge.
I never had that thought ever. I never thought about safety.
Yeah, I think, was it safety?
Yeah,
I didn't. It wasn't safety.
Why did it scare you?
Oh, because if it broke. No, it scared me because, oh my God, it's an old car. What if it breaks, right?
Oh.
What if, how am I going to get parts for it? How am I going to fix it? I was 21 years old and a 10-year-old car was old. Same thing. I was 20 when I bought my 6.9. Like that was that car was only 4 years younger than I was. So that car was 16 and that was a genuine antique to me. Like this was a car that I was buying to flip and make some money on because that's basically how I supported myself when I was in college. And it was this ancient car. Right. So those cars were 10 or effectively.
I never had that response because my first car was the same age as me. My second car was too.
I think that's highly unusual, right? I think that most people, their first enthusiast cars are cars that are 10 or an old car to most people is something that they remember when they were 8, 9, 10 to 11, 12 years old. It's sort of coming of age as a car enthusiast. And the joke is that I see somebody today, like my nephew, for example, who is 20 years old, and his, what the hell year is that? G35 that he's got is 2006. So that car's 3 years younger than he is. And it's an old car to him. I don't own anything that new. Like, that's the joke. So when you're talking to a 21-year-old today, a car that is as old as they are is a 2005 or 2006. And that's an F30. Those are old.
F30 came out in 2012.
Okay, fine, fair enough. But
E90,
right?
E90,
and
which is a genuinely good car, and
but it's a genuinely modern car to me, right? You and I think of that as like, oh my God, I don't need anything that new. That's the gut check that I do all the time is how old was this person when that car came out? And so for somebody today who's 25 years old, they're looking at a car that's 10 years old. Well, okay, that's an old car to them in the same way the Scirocco was an old car to me. 10 years old is think about that. Like 10 years old is a 2014.
Yeah.
2014. That is F30. So,
but the problem is there's no cars from 2014 that anyone who's an enthusiast wants.
Okay, and I would say, let's wind back the tape to when I was 20 years old.
Yeah, nobody said anything about the 80s was going to be
because they said it was shit.
Yeah, it has computers in it.
There's
a computer in it, carburetors.
Exactly. 16 valve with that little 1.8 liter, who cares? And then you go back 10 years before that, oh, there's plastic in the interior. Nobody's ever going to find this car collectible because there's plastic, because real cars have metal dashes that kill you on impact. I just feel like there's this moving window that we as aging car enthusiasts, and I don't mean that, but we're all aging, right? Every year goes by. As we get older, we really have to keep thinking about what an quote old car is to a young person. And I really do think about this all the time, that when my Scirocco turned 15, the day it was eligible, I ran myself over to the DMV and got classic plates for it. My fucking Lotus, my new car. That's like my new car is 15 this year. Like I think of that as a fully modern 100%. Like I could drive that off the dealership and say, it's 15 years old. I thought the Scirocco was ancient when it turned 15. Same thing's happening with the kids.
The other phenomenon, though, to discuss on this topic, which is at play, is that cars, to me, feel like they get collectible when they are not as old as it used to be. For example, 997 GT3 never really fell off and became worthless. There were certain cars that for a long time became worthless, and there's that certain cars don't do that anymore. We are acutely aware, and this is, I think, the result of the rate at which things are progressing, although you could argue this has often been the case. But people are very acutely aware of loss right now with the transition to EVs and the computerization of cars. And so there was never a moment where you could go and buy certain cars that for cheap, like E30 M3s for $10,000. You know, that to me feels like it's not happening anymore. Would you say what, E46 M3?
E46 M3 is dropped. So E36 is dropped, E46 is dropped.
E46s are still dropped. E36s are still dropped.
Yeah, E36s are still dropped. But E90, okay. So I think
E90s never went much below 20.
They never did. And I think there's a reason for it. I think what changed is the recipe changed and that car died. There was no follow-up to
replacement.
E90,
Yes, the same
right?
reason
F30
why Z8s never went below $80,000,
Exactly.
but SLs, Mercedes SLs, went to 12.
I think when you
when
find
something doesn't
the
get
end,
replaced, Ford GT, the 05, 06 Ford GT did the same thing.
You get the end of a story and the car ends and there's no follow-up to it. So for example, 1M coupes, they never really dropped either.
Same thing.
It was the end of a legacy, right? The M2 was ostensibly its replacement, but it really wasn't. It was
and that's,
I
think, what I'm lamenting is the fact that cars are changing quickly enough that people are realizing as soon as the last one goes out that the next one, you've lost something. And so they don't get cheap and accessible enough.
This is
the way that air-cooled 911s for decades used to be able to run around and pick them up for 10 grand.
Well, I think what you're seeing is the inflection point where cars used to get better and better and better and better and better, and now are getting not better, and they're getting worse and worse.
If you're
an
enthusiast.
As an enthusiast, right? And I think there are some ways, I sound like an old man saying that, and I have to check myself again, but I think in a lot of material ways, cars are no longer better and more. They were constantly getting faster and more efficient and more safe, and in a lot of ways better looking and more reliable and better built. And there was this inflection point, and if we use BMW as an example, or Porsches as an example, in the early aughts, where that stopped happening, and the cars got technologically better from a governmental perspective of
and from an engineer's perspective also.
Kind of not, because a lot of them got more complicated and then they're less reliable. So, everything got downsized and turbocharged. So on a government fuel economy test, they did better. But in the real world, they weren't actually any better. And, there's companies like, I don't know if you remember Automatic. That was a OBD2 thing that you can plug in and monitor all your gauges. That was all a sham. You paid $15 for it because what they did was look at all the real world data and then use that to sell to other car companies. And they knew, for example, I knew somebody who had worked with them and knew right off the bat that in the real world, the EcoBoost F-150s were actually using more fuel than the old naturally aspirated V8s. And that was something they never published. And I think they're long gone out of business. But that sort of real world degradation versus government regulations, like, oh, this thing has more power and it's faster. And yeah, genuinely, a lot of people do like the EcoBoost F-150s better, but the reality is it didn't line up. The reality didn't line up with the testing. And I think that's that inflection point where F30, all of a sudden the base 3 Series has a 4-cylinder turbo. Yeah, was it more efficient? Yeah, on government tests, yes. And on steady state highway cruising, yes. In the real world, probably not. But it certainly lost a lot of the charm that made the previous 3 Series so good, and the loss of hydraulic power steering. And so when you're on the downward slope, every time things don't get better. The exception to that has been Porsche GT cars. And so that's the really fascinating one, because every time one comes out, we think it's going to be the end of the end of the legacy, right? Oh, 911R is never going to get replaced.
From the old cloth. That's why it is spiritually an old car, even if it's not physically an old car.
But the GT team can't fix the fact that 992 is a big fat pig, and the 991 was a big fat pig. But what they can do is at least put brilliant powertrains and suspensions in them to make them work good enough.
Well, and if anybody can engineer their way around a bunch of sort of suboptimal original engineering choices, it's Porsche.
That's true. But yeah, this is the part of the market that I don't understand how, like, I can't predict, because I can tell you, like, M2, they're going to tank in value. They're going to continue to tank in value because they're being replaced by
something that does the same thing but better.
The same thing but ostensibly better, and they're never going to be that special like a 1M coupe was. But every time I get into a new 911, I'm like, yeah, the thing's going to tank in value, and the GT team comes out with something. So if we look at like 911R, okay, we thought that was going to be the best, so they were trading at $600,000 even though they're 3 times their sticker, and then GT3 Touring comes out and it's kind of better. At least as good and much more common.
Better in some respects and less special in others.
And then so that comes out and they were like, shit. All right.
Yeah, so then 911Rs went down to 250 or 300.
And then 992 comes out. We're like, oh, this thing is really big, really fat, really heavy, really numb, crappy interior that rattles all over the place. And then they come out with GT3 and it's spectacular again. And then people are paying $200,000 over a sticker. And now 911 ST happens. And it's like, wait a second, ST is probably better than 911R to drive. I would love to have them all together, which is probably better than, it's a better car than 997 G3 RS, for example, which was, to me, the 4-liter was a high bar, but they're at least, we're talking about them in the same sentence, right?
Yes, that's true.
Now, Porsche comes out with an announcement that they're killing off the fucking turbo downsized engines for the base Carreras. Whoa, hold on. Guess what? That means, A, I was right. And everyone who's been bitching about this downsized turbo trend was right, because Porsche was the one who did it best. And still they're reversing course because they see the difference between manual gearbox, the values and people's willingness to pay money for manual.
They understand their customer and they're responding to them.
And the customers don't want or aren't willing to pay big bucks for automatic turbos, and they are for manual ANA motors. So what happens to the Porsche values? That's the confusing one, because
which ones?
And this GT3 is the reign of the GT3 and those series of GT cars at Porsche over once Carrera goes back to a manual. This is uncharted shit. This is really interesting. Because that's the one exception to the market doing this.
The answer to the question lies in the experience. Does it provide an experience that is
equal to or greater than the old one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if you look at 996 GT3 versus 997 GT3, one is just a better version of the other, and so the value relationship between them has always been the same. The 997 is always worth a little bit more than the 996. There's a few people out there who will say, the 996 is better because it has fewer electronic. In large part, you're giving up very little when you
gain a lot.
When you gain a lot, and you give up very little when you go from the 996 to the 997 GT3.
Yes.
Great. And there's a big step that happens between 997 and 991 GT3. And so, if I had to choose one, I would choose a 997 over a 991 personally, and the subsequent versions because of the steering and the weight of the clutch and the shifter. There's something that was lost.
There's a philosophical change between 997 GT3 and 991 GT3.
Yes.
And 997 beats the shit out of you. That is a car that
it's old school.
I am not man enough to drive every day. That clutch is a knee breaker. The shifter will break your wrist. Yep. The car is violent.
Really firmly sprung.
And
doesn't have axle lift, so the approach and departure, you're always scraping.
It's seriously compromised. 991 GT3 cars, including R and everything else, are daily drivable.
Yes, 100%.
Which makes them better cars, but I think they're slightly less in experience. They're different enough in that sense.
That their values actually can be somewhat decoupled.
Exactly.
Yes.
But I am really curious to see what happens now, because I think you're right. You've identified that inflection point where cars aren't getting better.
Well, the turbocharged 911s, we do know the turbocharged base cars are going to be valueless.
Yeah. And think about the 4-cylinder box.
Yes. I was going to say exactly the same thing.
There's a perfect example. 5 years from now, somebody turns 20-something years old. Actually, I know someone already who's already bought a Cayman, a PDK 4-cylinder base Cayman for nothing. Because there were
Yeah, it's what 914s used to be.
right. It's a red-headed stepchild of the Porsche line, and those things will be worth $3,500.
Yeah, and then you can have a Porsche. It's an actual Porsche experience for no money,
and for that money, in the same way that 996s are not the best 911s ever made, but the money, wouldn't you factor the money in? Great.
Yeah, I
Beat
mean,
it
I
up.
daily
Don't worry
drove a
about
996 that I bought for $17,000, and at the same time, I had a Carrera 3.2 that I paid $35,000 for,
Right.
and I was like, this is literally half as much money as the Carrera 3.2, and it is appreciably better in some ways. You know, it's not as special of an experience, but as a daily, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
You know, and the 996 now, like you said, is an old car, and I think does feel old enough for a new generation of people. So,
And even when you start to look at things like an F30 BMW 3 Series, it was a huge disappointment when that car came out in almost every way, and I was really hard on it. Now, after driving G30 is a very different type of 3 Series.
I've never driven one, and I'm really struggling with what you're about to say.
F30 makes a compelling daily driver. Look at the sea of other choices you have. Oh, no, I'm going to go. That's fucking old. That's
I'm
my point.
fucking old.
Okay, but the kids who are buying that, somebody who's 23 years old who's got their first 26 years old straight out of grad school getting a grad. I mean, they're still seriously expensive cars, right? I mean, I'm not saying $20,000 is cheap, but if you want to go out and buy yourself an enthusiast car, $20,000 for one of those things is a hell of a daily driver against the sea of hybrid 4-cylinder other piles of shit that you could choose from. And that's the perspective we need to keep as we're getting old, or older.
But it's also a reflection of the state of the car industry, and
which has always been the case.
Lost.
Which has always been the case, because the 40s guys hated the 50 shit and the 60 shit, and the 60 guys hated the 80 shit, and the 80s guys hated the 2000. I don't want traction control. I want to die like a real man, sideways off a cliff when I hit an ice patch. It was the same shit. The fucking arguments that I used to have on the internet back to when there were listservs about people hating on anti-lock brakes. I could stop faster. No, you fucking can't. But I'm sorry, there were so many arguments we used to have in the Scirocco list, which is before VW Vortex or before any of these forums, where people are like, I'm keeping my Scirocco. I'm not buying a Mark III because I don't want anti-lock brakes.
I mean, people used to say that about power steering also versus manual steering.
What I think my takeaway from this whole discussion is it's
a bunch of shit that people don't care about.
But it's all the same shit. It's the same shit has happened throughout history, and I don't think the market has changed. I think I don't think that anything has happened other than an inflection point and the venue and ways that people sell cars.
Well, and the options that you have, if you want to buy a car of that era, what are the choices that you have that are actually enthusiastic and compelling? The menu is smaller.
Okay, a 15-year-old car now for a somebody who's coming of age as a young professional and has some money to spend in a car, I think they have plenty of choices. They're just not choices that you are interested in. Give me a Lexus ISF.
How would you think that menu of choices compares in voluminousness and affordability compared to?
Affordability is the same. That I'm going to fight you on. Voluminosity of choice. We have an entire category of cars that's gone, and that's the Sport Compact. Mm-hmm. That is everything from, everything we mentioned before. But if you really start digging into what was available in the 90s for purchase new at a dealership, that was kind of fun and cool, they're all gone. That whole segment of cars is gone. And that's everything from, we talked about the CRX, but also including Eclipse, Prelude, ZX2 Escorts. I mean, it was just, the world GT. Was your oyster. Mazda MX-3s it was just, that was a golden era to be, Nissan Sentra SER, for fuck's sake. That thing was like a dream. Yeah. That whole segment's gone. So you're totally right there. But I don't think the affordability is all that.
And
different.
So what are we left with in there? And so then instead you buy an ND2 for $20,000 or an NC
for 8
those are
or 10 or 12 or 15.
Yeah.
Right.
There you go.
Which is
expensive too.
Expensive? What was cheap? What was that 15 years ago in terms of inflation? Are you just that old man who was like, yeah, I bought my car for gas was $1.72 a gallon? No,
or $72.
$12,000 for an NC. That's $8,000 15 years ago. It's not. I don't think they've gotten that much more expensive.
Yeah, but the point is that the number of survivors is like, okay, you have Miata and you have BRZ, FRS, like,
I mean,
what else?
For new cars now or 10 or 15 year
No,
old
for
cars?
things that you would buy that are like in that sort of first discretionary car purchase
Oh
type
my
of
God.
realm.
Now I'm so terrible at random access facts. So like my hard drive's spinning, but the Excel sheet is
I just
clogged
feel
up.
like there's not that many of those options
I
left.
think there is. And I think if I pulled up my spreadsheet of all the cars that I drove in like 2007 and 2008 that were just in the press fleets back then, that's now almost 20 years ago. That's 18 years ago. I bet there's plenty of shit. I can't think of anything.
You were just saying words to try and give your hard drive.
There was okay. The Audi A4. I mean, look, if you really wanted to go for it, you bought an RS4, and that was a hell of a car, right? So you had
And
M3.
values have supported that. Those cars never really went much below the high 20s.
Yeah, they're not crazy. I mean, RS4. You can get an RS4 for, and that is. I mean, they're now really spiking in value. But you had GTI, you had R32. Both of them, Mark IV and Mark V. You had Jetta GLIs over there. Then you had Civic Si with the K20, and then the next one with the K24. Those were spectacular.
And these are all cars that happened to have direct analogs in the 90s that weren't part of this
I'll think of
vast
something.
shit canning.
There was a Genesis Coupe. Think about, so you had a 4-cylinder or a Turbo 4 or V6 Genesis Coupe.
Okay, so that replaces one sport
Lexus
compact.
IS
Let's call that
300.
Mitsubishi.
IS300, IS350, and the ISF. I'm just trying to think of like cars that were cool back then that like I would consider like still fun. Evo. You had Evo, STI,
Barely.
WRX.
They were like ready to die, and they have died since.
But that Evo 9 was fucking magic.
Yes.
And the Evo 10 wasn't half bad either. I think there was choice there. I'm trying to think of like what cool comparison test did I do back in the day of like other cars that I would get out of. I just, even like Infiniti, that M45, if you want like, this is a great car. M45 was the 5 Series sized, so it's a mid-sized sedan with a really lusty V8 and a 5-speed automatic that spun the shit out of it. So it was a great sports sedan. That would be like $3,500 for a car now that is fast and well built and solid. They smell like wet dogs, but everything else was great about them. There had to have, I kind of wish I could pull the spreadsheet out right now, but I bet you I could come up with 10.
10. That's not enough.
Yeah, but how many cars? Okay, how many cars from 1972 to 1975?
Oh, you just happened to choose like peak
60,
emissions
60,
enforced.
67 to 71 that you think are really of interest that would be affordable to people in 1980. I don't think any era has that many cars other than the sport compact era.
I mean, you would just like vast swaths of the muscle car thing, which just seems to go on ad infinitum. Like there was so many muscle cars.
There were 3 cars
during that
There
period.
were 3 cars, 3 basic cars with all different bodies on them. Next. What else was your choice? A Volkswagen Beetle, a Ford Pinto, a Chevette?
No, well then you start to go to like the 240Zs of the world and
That's one. Okay.
and then you well, should we then go to Europe?
Well, but okay, let's think about this. All right, you wanted 240Z in 1971, right? It's like, it's 80 something. We're talking 1983 and you're like, okay, I like something like a Z. How many choices did you really have in that sort of segment? You had obviously the Z. I guess you had an Alpha GTV or an Alfetta GT or something, some sort of Alfa
Or
Romeo
just
coupe.
a GTV, yeah, sure.
What other cars were there? I genuinely ask this. What other cars
I
were
mean,
there in that
911s
segment?
were cheap enough that they
Okay,
could be
that's
competing in that space too. BMW 2002. I mean, I don't know what else is there in that realm. All the British sports cars. You could do Triumphs and MGs and use Jaguar E-types and Austin Healey's and Aston Martins that were cheap then. So were Ferraris. I mean, they were all just free at that time. Basically,
My point is, could you really come up with more? Because you're like
Maserati
10,
Ghiblis.
only 10. How could you come up with 10 cars that were affordable and enthusiastic or like enthusiast focused that were from that were cheap enough in 83 from the range of 67 to 71? I don't think there'd be that many more than 10.
I think I could.
I think that's another episode. I don't know. I have to always balance the whole idea. Like to me.
So do you think it is as good a time to be a young enthusiast with some discretionary income now as it ever was?
If you
Do think
prioritize speed, yes. Otherwise, no. No, I think But I don't think it's as bad as I don't think the economics have changed all that much. To be honest with you, I really don't.
What about disposable income?
I'm not 20 something years old, so it's kind of hard to tell. I think about this all the time. One of the times I was most mad at my father, I was probably 19. I was in college. I was working full time, killing myself. So work and school full time. And something he said, we were talking about buying something and he was like, whatever, it's $100, Jason. It's $100. Like no big deal. And I was violent. I was like, $100? $100? That is so much money. It's like, here, it's $100. And he handed me a $100 bill. And I was so mad that I had to work. I mean, at the time I was probably making, I don't know, what, $12, $13 an hour. So you're talking 10 hours of work to after, and then 15 with taxes and everything else, just to be able to do what he thought was just meaningless, $100. And I catch myself now when my niece came here a couple weeks ago and she did that driving school. And I caught myself almost saying, $1,000, whatever. Like almost said that in front of her. And to someone who's finishing high school, like that is a life altering, like life changing amounts of money. And I think about that like, okay, $1,000 is to me right now at 48 years old, a very different thing than $1,000 was to me. Inflation aside, when I was 30, like at 30, $1,000, I can't take the chance of losing $1,000 or blowing $1,000. All right, I just spent $1,000 on a bunch of lighting and shit in my garage that's meaningless to me. But I think as you get older, that stuff, the dollar amounts, as you get more established and you're making more money and you've accrued more shit through your life, that stuff gets smaller and smaller. And so I don't think the economics have changed all that much.
I disagree with you strongly because I think that if you look at the cost of owning a home and how out of reach that is relative to the way that wages have gone up and the cost of education and the amount of student debt that comes with that and the fact that it is impossible to work an actual human number of hours and go through school and pay for the cost of school coupled with the cost of real estate. I mean, you've seen what real estate values have done alone. If you just look at real estate as an isolated example.
Yes, but I will also point out that I now live in the Bay Area, which is fucking nuts. And I could go back to, I bought my first house in Pittsburgh. It was not that long ago. Yes, it was. But I was 22 years old and the house was $77,600. And I remember laughing because I'm from New York, right? So New York and Germany, which were both very expensive real estate. And I wound up in school in Pittsburgh. I graduated and I'm like looking at like, well, I'm starting a business and I don't want to be at the whim of some landlord if I have to move the phone lines because phone lines were important. Phone numbers were not portable at the time. And I looked at like, oh, let me just buy a house out in the burbs. And it was $77,600. And I was just so easy. That house right now is maybe $200,000. And that was 98. So here we are. We're 25 years later.
Well, let's choose an urban area where someone who has a job that they take out of school has to actually.
That was Pittsburgh.
That's not a real place.
It is. And Carnegie Mellon's got a huge autonomous car stuff. I mean, my friend Weston, who passed away this year, spent half his time in Pittsburgh. And that was always funny to me that he was always going to Pittsburgh for high-tech shit. He worked for Aurora. And that was where their base was. So you could easily live in a sort of secondary or tertiary city. No offense to any of that, but Pittsburgh isn't a major metro area in the way that the Bay Area or New York or Chicago or Boston is. Wonderful place to live and actually genuinely affordable. So I think
if you look at
here.
where you see the percentage of the population, right? Let's choose the place where the 25% of the United States lives, which is going to be ex-urban areas, and you say, what is the affordability of buying something there when you're fresh out of school? And then you couple that with the cost of servicing your student loans. You're not even in the market to buy a discretionary car at that point.
Oh no,
anymore.
No, but I don't know. I genuinely. I'm not gonna disagree with you that it's not gotten harder. But I think our perspective here in the Bay Area has made it makes it look worse than it is in most other places. I think education has gotten insanely expensive. But I haven't really taken a hard look at what it would be like to replicate my life.
We're not talking about cars anymore.
Yeah, well, we kind of are because at 22 years old, I bought a house in a Mercedes. right? And I literally was making nothing. I mean, God, I'm divulging too much. $13,000 that year, killing myself. But the Mercedes was $3,200, and the house was $77,000. And and then I had the Scirocco that I did screw my father into buying me for $1,500. But there I was living large in like a brick house on a cul-de-sac. That was super cute. And it cost me $300 a month, and the car was like $40 a month. And it was, I don't know how much harder it's gotten to live there, but I don't live there anymore. And you don't live there. And so, I think I agree with you in almost all aspects about how it's less good to be an enthusiast now. But I think everyone at the age of 35 would say that about, looking back. When I had more choice, and we had better cars to choose. And I think it's gotten more difficult to support yourself with paying for a college education. And I think there are a lot of economic forces that have changed, but I don't think it's changed as much as it appears to us because we're just getting older.
Okay.
And you don't want an F30.
I don't want an F30.
But kids now who were 12, people who were 12 years old when the F30 came out do. And that's an old car to them.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have the same reaction. I'm like, what? Why would you want that shitbox? And then I realized, hold on. When
you look at the alternatives.
Ta-da. And you think about what was that age when I was a kid. When I was, in my late teens, early 20s, I kind of wanted 80s cars as an old car because they were 10 years old.
I always wanted cars that were like at least as old as me, and ideally 20 years older. I
think that's a really rare thing.
Yes.
I think that's what makes you special. And to be honest, poised. No, and I don't say this to insult you. This is actually a really big compliment. I think it's what makes you almost uniquely qualified to do the work that you do and start the company that you've started. Now, Tazio has the same sort of unusual experience. Yeah. Is that, he was probably in the shop as a baby when my old Ferrari was there because Otis maintained that car from 86 to 2000. So he was exposed to things that most children aren't, and most young people aren't. And you, same thing, for whatever whatever it was that caused your interest to lie with older cars. And then for you to start working at wherever the places you were working, I guess it's FJ and whatever else, where you're photographing and washing the cars just so you could be around them. I think that's a hell of an education that most people your age don't have. And the fact that you can now marry that with a knowledge of the way the world works for younger people and in the way that oldie-timey car dealerships can't. Wow, you got to pay this by check and wire transfer, and we're just going to take pictures of it. Versus you who understand how to market a car online, how to market a car at an online auction, how to reach the people who are now coming of age financially and are now able to afford these cars, but then also how to tell them the stories with BTS of why they should care about this car. I think you're really uniquely qualified to do it, but I think your perspective is not normal.
Yes, that much has been always true for sure.
Yeah, I think you are very different. And I think the audience, I think everyone should put in the comments.
How different I am?
How different is he?
This is like, where on the spectrum is Derek?
We're not going to
we shouldn't talk about that.
No, but I really think it's very important for us to keep in mind, to go think how.
I just want there to be a future that's pretty cool for the next generation of enthusiasts.
There is.
I'm genuinely, that is a concern for me. But that was also a concern for adults when I was a kid. And, Radwood cars became... we always saw it. I guess the best way to do this is to survey, right? I always thought Radwood cars were cool. There were all these cars that I lusted after that were all free, comparative to how they are now, 500Es and, all this 80s stuff that was worth nothing that has become valuable. Countach's used to be $75,000 because they were like, oh, I see you can't afford a new one.
Yeah.
And so no matter the price point, there's always some car where you're like, that's so cool. I just wish I had $75,000, which, now those are $750,000.
That's so nuts.
It's just the landscape has changed. I'm curious. I guess now the thing to do would be to survey the next generation of people who were born after 2000 and say, what cars do you lust after that are like $10,000, $30,000, $50,000, $75,000 that you just be like, man, if I only had that much, I'm sure I could sort of look at what exists at those price points and figure out the answer to that
You look at it, you see
is
it.
it a 360 for $70,000 or something like that?
Yeah, but they're kind of lusting after that, but what they're really doing is buying VQ engine Nissans and Infinitis. And
no, but just to say,
BMWs
if you had a pile of money fall in your lap right now, what are the cars you would buy at each price point?
Yeah,
you know?
I bet they wouldn't line up with stuff that we're interested in.
No, that's fine. I'm curious to know what those are because that's where the future is going to be. That's where the appreciation is going to lie in the future.
Well, that's something for the comments. I mean, if you're 25 years old or under, and somebody gave you $75,000 today, what are you doing with it? This was a game that I used to play with my friend Mike. Was all right, $50,000. What are you buying? Or I give you.
You can't sell it.
You can't sell it, right? What are you getting? Yeah. Or you buy a car, you have to keep it for 3 years and then sell it. And so what is it? And you're absorbing, like I'm giving you the $75,000, but you absorb operating costs. We used to do this all the time. I would love to, like, if I had $75,000 right now, I know what I would buy, but I'm weird. I already have 11 cars. And I'm not.
You're scratching an itch that's in a place that is like a very remote place as opposed to like the obvious place that first problem that needs solving.
You know what we should do? We should do like a live episode or something. I love how I'm signing us up for all kinds of shit. We have no way, but we should do a live episode where we have a conversation with younger people about this, like where they just come in and say their age and what they want to do. We make fun of them for choosing the wrong thing.
It doesn't have to be live. You could do this in the comments, or we could do it as an AMA or as when we solicit questions. But
I think that's a great idea.
I'm interested for the future.
Yep. I'm interested for your future and your business's future.
Yeah,
I think
me too. It's an exciting time, the startup where you're just like, interesting. Some revenue would be nice, but it also things take a while. You got to put in some effort and fill the hopper and sort of do that. And the idea that everything should just fall in your lap is something that I don't subscribe to. This is going to take some slogging and stuff like that. So we'll have a grand old time with that.
Go visit Derek's new website, which is what?
OTS and Co. Or if you prefer OT Sand Co., which
OT
we
Sand Co.
discovered by mistake. So we have to get a bucket of sand to put by the front of the door when people first walk in. Why is there a bucket of sand
that says OT on it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Off-topic sand.
Off-topic sand. And, oh my God. Okay. Great.
Thank you for joining us for this
Happy New Year episode.
Yes, Happy New Year episode.
We didn't do one last week, did we? I guess, that last year was New Year's Day.
It was, yes, but we failed to
Caught
deliver
us
on that.
being lazy or being in bed with COVID.
We had one on Christmas.
That's true.
Okay. All right, thanks for joining us. See you next week, most probably.
Yes.
All right.